Welcome to Kapowich on Real Estate. This is Pat Kapowich back with another great episode with one of my heroes, Santa Clara County Assessor Larry Stone. Larry, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Listen, I often joke you have you are the brightest young mind in politics.
Well, thank you. I don't know about young, but thanks for the compliment.
Okay, that reminds me because when you were a younger man in politics in Sunnyvale, so you actually went from Wall Street to Main Street to First Street. And can you explain what I'm speaking about there?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and when I got out of graduate school, I was recruited to go back to work on Wall Street in New York City. And that was quite a thrill, being 23 years old and being able to work on Wall Street. I was there for a couple of years, and then the company that I worked for, that was the second largest firm on Wall Street at the time, transferred me out to the regional headquarters in San Francisco. When I lived in New York, I was single. I lived on the east side of Manhattan. When I came to San Francisco, I got married and we had a small baby. And so my boss said, I want you to come back to New York now and continue to work on Wall Street. And I said, whoa, it'd be a different lifestyle. So I met up with a couple of guys and we started a real estate investment company. We were the first tenant at 3000 Sand Hill Road.
That's right.
And so I lived in San Francisco. My wife's from Arizona. She was always cold in San Francisco. And so we drove south until she felt warm. And that just happened to be Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
So I bought my first home in Sunnyvale in 1970 while I worked on at Sand Hill Road. 3000 Sand Hill Road, we were the first tenant at 3000 Sand Hill Road in 1970.
Well, they don't call it Sunnyvale for nothing, right?
Right. And then, of course, when I was elected to county assessor, the county assessor's office, the headquarters of the county are on First Street and Heading. So that kind of completes the circle here from Wall Street to Main Street to First Street.
Right. And I've heard all your speeches. You mentioned once your dad was active in politics and ran for Congress, I believe.
Yeah, I ran for Congress one time, before I was born, and he lost by 9 votes. And I asked him one time, why didn't you ever do it again? And he said, I realized I was a better kingmaker than a king. So he was involved in politics most of his life.
Sounds like the perfect political man to have in the background. Now,
I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, I would imagine. Did he live long enough to see you in politics?
Yes, in fact, the first meeting I was mayor in Sunnyvale, he came down from Seattle to see it.
Oh, wow.
And so when he got through, I said, hey, Dad, how'd I do? And he said, oh, you did wonderfully. He said, but in politics, Larry, when you got the votes, keep your mouth shut. And I learned, I've never forgotten that, is that, don't talk your way out of success.
Great advice. Yeah, well, advice from Dad. As good as it gets. Okay. What I've done, of course, is collect your speeches. And I've shuffled them and put them together. And I asked you and your wonderful staff and Lori put together some notes here. So we have it in a good order for today here in 2022. And I'd like to start with pre-COVID. If you could discuss pre-COVID environment here in America, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley.
Well, the 10 years prior to COVID was one of the longest and sustained recoveries in U.S. economic history. That's coming out of the 2008 Great Recession. When I say the longest, in fact, it took about 8 or 9 years to fully come out of the greatest recession that we've ever had in modern economic times. And then it was up and to the right since that time. And then suddenly, in 2020, as we all know, the COVID recession hit.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. So when it hit, how did that affect not only Silicon Valley, where you are a county assessor, but the rest of the country?
Well, it caused the immediate disruption of all economic activity. It was the fastest decline in economic history. So the COVID disruption impacted the way, we engaged in with others in social activities, how we interact with others in the workplace, how we travel, how we shop, how we buy groceries. So it had a major impact upon our lives significantly for almost 2.5 years. Business investment, retail sales, home construction, exports, and consumer and government spending all reached record levels of decline beginning with the COVID recession in 2020. At that time, the federal government, to a lesser extent, the state, reacted to this crisis very quickly, providing a huge financial stimulus to boost the economy, of course, $2.5 trillion in direct payments and $1 trillion in tax relief. Well, in my opinion, that federal stimulus was excessive and completely undisciplined. The purpose of a stimulus is to put money in the hands of people, expecting the people will spend the money, therefore boosting the economy. But during COVID, people couldn't spend the money that they received because everything was shut down. So what happened? People saved their stimulus and in some cases, even their unemployment checks. So the result? Well, a significant increase in savings, not spending, which is contrary to the purpose of a stimulus payments to begin with. During COVID, Americans were stockpiling savings, which reached a 30-year high, and consumer loans and credit card balances reached their lowest level in years. Then suddenly, in the last half of 2021, last year, America started spending at record levels. And despite skyrocketing consumer prices, which we've been experiencing for the first half of this year, consumer spending continues to rise faster than inflation. So consumer spending, combined with widespread product and worker shortages, has created the highest inflation rate since the 1980s. Our economy is simply overheated.
Okay, now I've heard you speak many times about inflation. Do you feel that that's going to be long-term, short-term?
Well, that's the argument that's going on with the Fed and most of the economists in the country. But most of them believe that inflation will persist well into next year's. Chris Thornburg of Beacon Economics, a guy that I listen to a lot, he believes it's going to get worse. He said the other day that mortgage rates could go as high as 10%. Now, coming out of a 2.5% to 3% mortgage environment, that sounds rather severe, but it's not unusual. In the 70s and 80s, residential mortgages average about 9%. So the U.S. economy has really run headfirst into a perfect storm. High demand and low supply, causing prices to soar and interest rates to rise. Everything from food and fuel to rent and automobiles, both new and used, cost more than they did a year ago. So the problem rests firmly with the Federal Reserve. Chairman Jerome Powell pledged recently, last week as a matter of fact, that he would do everything that he could to curb inflation.
Now, I'm on a lot of Zoom calls in the real estate industry, local, state, and national, and we're talking about I know we've had some increases twice, I believe, so far this year. What do you see? Was that the last hike for interest rates? We're going to have some more.
We're going to have some more, maybe one or two more this year, because the problem is that severe. In May, of course, as you mentioned, the Fed increased its benchmark interest rates by 0.5 point, and then came back the next month in June and increased it another 0.75 point, which was way above what most people thought was going to happen. But the likelihood that the Fed can engineer a so-called soft landing, which Chairman Powell keeps talking about, the potential of a soft landing, I think that opportunity is diminishing. Many analysts believe that the Fed can't defeat stubbornly high inflation rates without inflicting some pain. And most likely, what form does the pain take? higher unemployment. The whole issue is very delicate. If the Fed raises borrowing costs too quickly to slow growth and tame inflation, that could tip over and drive the economy into another recession. So what's the problem? Well, the main problem we face right now is supply chain disruptions, exacerbated, of course, by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the pandemic lockdowns in China. These are serious problems facing the American economy right now. Our ports are hopelessly clogged. The U.S. economy is beginning to cool from high inflation and rising interest rates. GDP declined for the first 3 months of this year, the first quarterly decline in over 2 years.
Okay, now I've heard you speak many times about the labor shortage. What are your views on the labor issue here in America?
Well, all this economic chaos, which I've been describing, it certainly has resulted in a labor shortage, and we see that every day, particularly a shortage of service workers. The U.S. labor market remains exceptionally tight. The number of job openings right now reached a record 11.5 million in May. Interestingly and surprisingly, there are 2 job openings for every unemployed worker today. So despite the fact that the U.S. economy is recovering rapidly and 12 million jobs lost to COVID have been recovered, there's still 5 million fewer jobs today than there were in February of 2020. 350,000 of those are in California. The U.S. has recovered 96.5% of the jobs lost during the pandemic. The Bay Area and California lag behind the national job recovery. The Bay Area has recovered just 80% of the jobs lost, California 93%.
Well, this brings up, you've spoken at a lot of realtor meetings and Chamber of Commerce, and it's very odd that Americans are quitting their job at such a rapid rate. What is your take on that?
Well, in the month of March alone, 4.5 million U.S. workers quit their jobs, the highest on record. It's a sign of a couple of things. Number one, it's a sign that workers are confident that they can find better pay or improved working conditions somewhere else. Workers are enjoying historically high job security right now. It's referred to as the Great Resignation. You know that song, "You Can Take This Job and Shove It," comes to mind.
Sure.
Actually, it's really the Great Reshuffle. COVID also gave people the time to rethink their lives and their careers, and many have decided to ditch previous jobs in industries like restaurants and hospitality for higher pay and benefits in places like transportation and warehousing, providing a more consistent, confident work schedule. Workers have discovered that they can leverage a chaotic labor market to their advantage, a rare opportunity to demand better pay and working conditions. And finally, retirements accelerated significantly during COVID. 3 million people dropped out of the labor force. Unprecedented.
Okay, because this, I asked you and your wonderful staff there, Lori, to put something together about the future of the job market. You have some distinct views regarding that topic.
Yeah, the long-term future of the job market is somewhat clouded, as maybe more baby boomers are leaving the labor force than millennials, those born after 1980, or Gen Zers now, born after 1996, are entering the labor force. In the long term, this could have serious consequences. You know, baby boomers like me grew up in households of 3 to 4 children. Well, demographers tell us that millennials are having an average of 1.2 children. Consequently, there won't be sufficient Gen Zers, the children of millennials, to maintain a stable workforce in the future. Increased immigration and robotics are the only solution to meet our future workforce demands. Universal pre-K, for example, allows more women to re-enter the labor force, which will help.
Yeah.
Americans have been poisoned by the anti-immigration sentiments and the political rhetoric that comes with it. So that's the problem. We got to face up to immigration in a real sense as being a positive impact upon our economy, not a negative one. Chris Thornburg again recently said there's been no collapse of wealth, just huge inequality in wealth distribution. The Great Recession lasted nearly 8 years, as I mentioned earlier. The COVID recession technically lasted only 18 months. Thornburg said that the COVID recession was the deepest and shortest recession in economic history, and he's right. California, as we know, is a large, diverse economy, but that diversity is our strength because it creates a broader economic base. Silicon Valley, particularly, is structured to resist long-term declines in economic activity. Big tech has a special kind of resilience because innovation is the driving force behind our success.
Okay, let's speak about that because you were on Sand Hill Road with the venture capitalists, and there was a lot of activity here, right, for venture capitalists?
For a long time. Economic uncertainty certainly didn't stop venture capital investments. It just exploded last year. Venture capital, led by a record number of mega deals in the Bay Area alone, hit a record high last year, reaching $80 billion. $29 billion of that in the third quarter alone. Angel investments were also up over 20% last year. There are significant differences, I think, which is important, between the 2008 Great Recession and the COVID recession. The 2008 Great Recession was caused by, as we all know, subprime mortgage credit fraud and excessive risk-taking by major financial institutions. Worker layoffs back then were more permanent. The U.S. economy didn't fully recover from the Great Recession until around 2015. So huge spikes in unemployment, in which 22 million jobs were lost virtually overnight. The fastest decline in economic history was directly related to the sudden health pandemic, totally outside of the normal financial system. Workers were laid off from profitable, sustainable businesses that were ordered to close.
Okay, speaking of ordered to close, one of the hardest hit under the umbrella of real estate, which you spoke about often, is the economic implications of the pandemic on hospitality.
Well, they were hit hardest. The travel industry, hospitality, and leisure sectors were hit first and hit hardest. The hotel and lodging sectors are most vulnerable due to the decrease in tourism and business travel, in addition to government-imposed limits on things like public gatherings, conventions, conferences, trade fairs, and even sporting events. Hotels that depend primarily on business travelers, which is the largest source of hotel revenue, suffered the most. During COVID, business travel was down 85%.
Wow.
In fact, the hotel industry is not expected to fully recover until from 2019 levels until around 2024. The airlines and hospitality industries are dependent upon each other. I guess that's obvious. The airline and aerospace industries have been in a severe state of disarray. The disaster for the travel industry in 2020 was 10 times worse than 9/11. But as businesses, and listen to this, as businesses become more comfortable with Zoom and webinars, this could have a more permanent impact on business travel and ultimately on lodging.
Absolutely. I remember my dad was always on business trips growing up. That wouldn't happen today. Now, tell us about retail. That was hard hit too, correct?
Absolutely. The retail sector is increasingly weaker. Even it was beginning to get weak before COVID. Fear of social contact, plummeting consumer confidence, exacerbated, I guess, by the serious challenges already facing the retail sector, particularly in-store retailers. It's had a major effect. Restaurants, food and beverage outlets, major malls have suffered from compulsory or self-imposed access restrictions. Bloomberg recently reported that 11,000 restaurants, more than 10% of all restaurants in the United States, closed permanently last year. According to CBRE, it will be at least a year or two before the restaurant market comes back from the free fall, as the public must feel more comfortable. the increased prevalence of online shopping versus traditional brick and mortar stores all point in the same direction. Online sales grew exponentially faster than in-store sales. So, as you alluded to, the retail bubble is burst. And the problem is not cyclical. I believe it's a forever trend. Retail malls are leading the retail mess. It's referred to today as the unmalling of America.
Right.
One major retail researcher projected that 30% of the nation's 1,100 malls will close in the next 4 years. He said, and I quote, "Malls as a property type are dead. Malls are only worth the dirt they sit on. Their structures have no value." Think about that. A French company that is the principal owner of Valley Fair and Oak Ridge malls here in San Jose, the largest owner of retail malls in the world, announced recently that it will divest the company of all malls in the United States over the next 3 years, including Valley Fair and Oak Ridge malls. Forbes reported that nearly 16,000 retail locations closed permanently last year, compared to just 7,000 in 2019. And 60% of those stores are mall-based.
Okay, I know you have, regarding malls, I know you have some fun facts about malls. What is going to happen to the town mall that we all got used to?
Well, traditional shopping centers, particularly malls, are being repurposed in many cases to consumer centers with a mixture of uses, including things like fitness and health and wellness, co-working operations, or being converted to things like offices, affordable housing, distribution centers for e-commerce, classrooms, churches, museums, even transitional space for the homeless. Let me give you an example. San Diego's iconic Horton Plaza, a 900,000 square foot open air 5-level retail mall encompassing 6.5 city blocks in downtown San Diego, has been redeveloped as a mixed-use tech and life science hub.
Wow.
Local elected leaders, I think, must give up their love affair with retail shopping centers for the sales tax revenue, as in-store retail is a declining enterprise. When I was a council member and mayor, the whole deal was that you got a big box retailer to come into your city, and you would locate it right on the border of an adjoining city. So you got all the sales tax revenue and they got all the traffic. That's no longer the case. With the inevitability of autonomous cars, vast surface parking lots present an opportunity for housing development. Millennials are the driving force behind e-commerce. Millennials grew up in a one-click world where speed and convenience is expected, indeed demanded. So the barrage of retail bankruptcies and store closures and diminishing revenues, and we all know who they are, has truly become a survival of the fittest. Name brand debt-ridden retailers like Borders Books, Loehmann's, Sports Authority, Linens and Things, Toys R Us, Payless Shoes, Forever 21, Orchard Supply right here, J. Crew, Lord & Taylor, Brooks Brothers, Steinmart, Pier 1 Imports, and Sears continue to disappear or file for bankruptcy. One retail leader described it as the 3 C's: closures, consolidations, and contractions. Excess Space Solutions Company projects that retailers are expected to downsize their storefront space by 40 to 50% over the next 10 years. But nevertheless, e-commerce sales, you'll find this surprising, still represent only 18% of total retail sales, while 4 in every 5 U.S. consumers regularly shop online, and 40% of those online shoppers buy something on Amazon once a month.
Okay, that reminds me, because you had mentioned in the past about the winners, the online companies.
Well, the winners in the traditional retail sense are people like Walmart, Target, and Costco. And of course, online is Amazon. Amazon's market cap reached 1.1 trillion yesterday, which is greater than the market cap of the other 15 retailers combined. And those others are Walmart, Costco, Target, Nordstrom's, Best Buy, and 10 others. Amazon's market cap is greater than those 15 retailers combined.
Wow.
Many people believe that Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook are abusive monopolies and that our markets are no longer competitive. Google has a 92% market share and accounts for 22% of the S&P 500 all by itself. Apple owns 4 of the 5 biggest apps, 79% of the smartphone profits, and became the first $3 trillion company. Facebook has 2 billion subscribers, nearly as many as Christianity has followers. So there is real concern that our markets are no longer competitive. But at the same time, while all this is going on, we are seeing a transformational turn in the retail industry. It's referred to as clicks to bricks, where established e-commerce retail brands have been opening brick and mortar retail locations, benefiting from their e-commerce brand and success, building, of course, a local retail presence, but most importantly, improving their distribution footprint.
Okay, now speaking of that now, in our neighborhoods, let's go into the residential real estate market. What's your view on housing?
Well, it's completely changing almost as we speak. In April, median home prices in Santa Clara County increased 23% year over year to 1.8 million. Fewer homes for sale, global unrest, and the stock market declines have given would-be home buyers some concern. That trend has traditionally changed since early May. Mortgage rates have more than doubled recently. Owners are reducing their asking prices as buyers are dialing back their demand for homes.
Okay, now what about the luxury housing market?
Kind of different. In Silicon Valley, luxury home sales are impacted more by the stock market than mortgage rates. Yeah. Wealthy tech professionals, driven by record stock prices and low interest rates, have been snapping up expensive homes. Conversely, as homes become less affordable, primarily because of interest rates, apartment rents have fully recovered, up 12.8% for both new leases and renewals. So as the home market goes down, people have to live somewhere, and they live in apartments. So the outlook for apartment rents and apartment occupancy gets stronger as interest rates go up.
Speaking of which, I've asked you about teleworking before, working from home. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Very controversial. I think the jury is out on the long-term impact of teleworking on particularly the office market, which everybody's concerned about. Most experts believe there will ultimately settle on some kind of hybrid approach where you spend a couple days in the office and the rest of the time at home.
Okay, now speaking of the office, in terms of the impact of COVID on the commercial market.
Well, Silicon Valley's commercial property market recorded its biggest year ever in 2021, which surprises a lot of people. Avison & Young reports that right now there are 115 office properties under construction or in the planning pipeline in Silicon Valley, totaling 51.7 million square feet of office space. Boston Properties resumed work on a 1.1 million square foot Class A office building, which the company shut down when COVID hit in San Jose. They've just resumed the construction. Right now, there are 16 million square feet of high-rise office space under construction or in the planning and pipeline stages in downtown San Jose area. Now, not all of that will get built. but everybody's watching what the J. Paul 19-story office building currently under construction right now in downtown San Jose, how that leases up. And I think how much of that 16 million square feet of space gets built is dependent upon how well J. Paul's totally spec office building is doing or will do when it's completed in downtown San Jose. Silicon Valley office rents, again, reached an all-time high last year. That's according to Colliers. LinkedIn, Tesla, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook completed major leases and property acquisitions in the fourth quarter of last year alone. CBRE recently declared, and listen to this, Silicon Valley, the number one market for office development in the United States. I guess our high-tech ecosystem is the reason for that. The Mercury News reported that investors are gobbling up existing Bay Area office buildings, a reflection, I guess, on the long-term strength of the tech market. The Silicon Valley industrial and warehouse markets are very strong. Locally, industrial and warehouse vacancy was 1.8% in March, below pre-COVID levels. Green Street Real Estate, a firm I respect, expects dramatic growth in industrial property values this year.
Now, who are the winners in this pandemic?
Well, to begin with, the healthcare industry, of course, healthcare, clinics and labs, medical device manufacturers, and of course, entertainment like Netflix, and tech companies, again, like Facebook, Apple, Google, and Microsoft. Teleconferencing like Zoom and webinars, and of course, here they are again, Amazon. Online retailers are benefiting from accelerating the impact of e-commerce on brick and mortar retailers. The increase in online shopping created a demand for more logistic facilities. Logistics and data centers and life sciences are on fire, and that's not a one-off. I don't think it's a serious trend. As consumers shift from in-store purchasing to online, and consumers are demanding faster shipment, even same-day delivery, then e-commerce distribution centers must be located in city centers. And then there's reverse logistics, the need to facilitate the increase in the number of returns from e-commerce. This will continue to fuel the demand, I think, for the logistics sector. Industrial real estate, particularly warehouse, which is the last mile of distribution, will be the most desired asset class this year. Single family is also expected to be strong, including the newest trend, single family detached homes for rent.
Exactly.
Millennials are the driving demand for this type of product.
Now, hospitality and retail are bringing up the rear.
Yeah.
You started to talk about how COVID also took its toll on the tax revenue.
Yeah, so this is something that should not be ignored, but often is. COVID took a significant toll on tax revenues. Government spending is an important component of a healthy economy. There's a connection between economic growth and tax revenues. So when tax revenues decline, so does government spending. Mm-hmm. Again, McKinsey and Company analyzed the impact of automation on job growth and concluded that 46% of jobs could be replaced by the current methods of automation by 2030. That's only 7 years away almost. Stanford computer science professor said at the 2019 Joint Venture Silicon Valley Conference that 50% of all jobs could be automated today by artificial intelligence. For example, there are 3.5 million truck drivers and 700,000 bus drivers in the United States who will likely be displaced by autonomous trucks and buses. Cruise, a subsidiary of General Motors, and Waymo are operating robot cars without backup drivers on the streets of San Francisco today. So driverless technology has moved out of the R&D phase. By 2023, you will be able to text up an autonomous taxi cab. You can do that right today in Chandler, Arizona.
What about, you had often spoke about the great California exodus. Is that a concern or a crisis?
It isn't a crisis, but it is a concern. In 2021, more than 280,000 people left California for other states than people that moved to California from other states. So I asked the question, well, where did these Californians go? Well, they went to Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, and Oregon. Not surprising. But where did these new Californians come from? Well, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Washington, and New York. The population slowdown, which is occurring, particularly here in California, is triggered by several things. First of all, the slump in births, which is down, reduced immigration, the rise in deaths, many from COVID, and the steady stream of people leaving California because of the cost of housing. In the 10 years ending in 2019, however, California's exit rate was just 1.6%, the lowest of any state in the nation. In Silicon Valley, only 4 companies have left California recently. By and large, their workforce didn't go with them. Tesla is still manufacturing automobiles in Fremont. Tesla recently leased a 325,000 square foot office building in North San Jose. So much for Texas. Apple purchased 5 buildings in Cupertino last year. Now, we never want to lose population, particularly because recently California lost a congressional seat. But a crisis? No. A concerning trend? Probably. Apple's net worth has been $3 trillion. Google worth about $2 trillion, and Facebook worth, as I said, $1 trillion. But 80% of all tech R&D still occurs right here in Silicon Valley, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I think the demise of Silicon Valley is grossly exaggerated.
Now, Larry, I want to thank you for coming out today, and you've promised to come back and share more of your thoughts. Is that true? So I have you on the air. I want to get this on record.
Yes, I have to update this presentation almost daily because the economy, what happened last month could change next month.
Yeah.
And we're in a real transition stage when it comes to jobs, it comes to economic activity, it comes to it's just a real whirlwind right now. So you better ask me back quicker than later because I'll have to do a whole new story, I'll bet.
You're in luck because what I'm asking now is I'm going to end this broadcast. I want you to stay right there, have your able right-hand person, Lori, stay there. I want to ask you a few more questions on different topics so the audience can take a look at that as well.
Have at it.
Okay. Thanks again for coming out. This is Kapowich on Real Estate. I'm Pat Kapowich. So pleased to bring you Larry Stone. We will see you next time.